good. How was your week?
That's great.
Yeah. So far, so good. God over that. Yeah, right.
Is this some sort of a joke?
Well, welcome back, everybody, to the 6th episode of our podcast called A Priest, a Minister, and a Rabbi Walk into a Bar. I'm Father Roger Gustafson, pastor of St. Hilary Catholic Church in Tiburon, California, and my co-hosts are Bethany Nelson, pastor over at Westminster Presbyterian, and Naomi Weiss, cantor at Kol Shafar. We're all in Tiburon, California. If you've never been to Tiburon, you should come by sometime. It is a gorgeous place in the world.
So true.
Today we are filming live on location at Hop Monk Bar in Novato, California. We thank them so much. If you're ever in Novato, you're up this way. They have great food, great drinks.
Oh yeah.
Martinis, awesome. And that vodka tonic you got right there. So please make sure you stop by. Just a quick little disclaimer, we always say it at the beginning, is we have theology training, but we are not experts in theology. So anything that we say is solely our own views and do not represent the opinions of anybody else, right?
Amen.
And also, we, in this podcast, take a lighthearted look at religion. Religion is a serious subject, but we try not to take ourselves too seriously, right? So with that, let's get started. Today, our topic is healthy habits. Our topic is about forming good habits, how to form good habits, and especially self-care. So to begin that, I think it's a perfect topic because we're headed into summer. And I think Bethany has a little bit of a different perspective, but I think a lot of times, speaking for myself and for others, we have a hard time sticking to good habits and taking care of ourselves with good habits over the summer. You know, family barbecues.
Oh, that's a good point.
Vacations.
He's like, oh yeah,
right.
barbecues.
Yeah, dinners out. So how about you guys?
Yeah, although I was saying, I find the summer to be more spacious, at least in my calendar. You know, fewer committee meetings, lots of congregants out of town. So I actually find with that spaciousness, I'm able to focus more on some of my healthy habits or spiritual practices that sometimes, unfortunately, get a little shoved aside when the schedule's really manic.
Yeah. Got a good example of that? It's something you do better in the summer.
In the summer. So I'll say here at the start, this is an odd time for me because I'm actually currently on sabbatical. So I'm not working at all summer long. I say that with a huge
I literally hate you.
I love that. That makes me so happy.
So in fact, I'm on week 3 right now. And I really have been trying to think about, now that I have all of this time, what practices do I really want to think about and focus on? One that I've been doing is, I've been doing a lot of reading, both just for pleasure and for thought and sermon use and teaching and, some more serious reading.
Feeding your mind?
Yes, feeding my mind. And that's been really lovely. So there's one example.
More time to read.
Yeah, more time to read.
And I think I also am with
So
Bethany.
jealous.
I know, me too. I'll read when I'm retired. I also as well feel that the summer, from the fall through the end of May, my work schedule is like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. often.
Yeah.
And I don't leave until it's dark, and now it gets light earlier, and I try to set some of my appointments not until 7 or 8 p.m., but maybe be finished by 6 p.m. and there are 3 hours of light left. And then once it's light, I'm like, I could go to the gym.
I could.
And I might. Or I can go for a walk. And
possibility.
And I do. So
yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, maybe I'm the only one. But that does bring up an important point about our topic today about good spiritual habits. When we say good spiritual habits, we are assuming that we're actually talking about body, mind, and soul, right? Body, mind, and soul, because we believe, in the Judeo-Christian tradition that, the body is not separate from the mind. God made everything. And so to have good habits that ultimately draw us closer to God, right? We need to take care of our bodies, we need to take care of our minds, and we need to take care of our souls.
And I actually think that we are called by God to do so. Like, it is a part of faithful living to care for ourselves, right? You know, God created each one of us. You know, God cares for us as God's beloved children. We are created in the image of God. Then we are called to be nice to this creation, to care for this creation. Like, I think, you know, that as a person of faith, that's something that I really need to do.
Yeah. I have a question for both of you about your parishes. So does your congregation support your self-care? Because I have worked at congregations.
Dangerous question, Naomi.
I mean, I've worked at congregations that did not, and I
Yes.
currently am employed by a congregation that very much cares deeply about my well-being, and I've actually
Yes.
never experienced that before coming to Congregation Cultural Fire at Tiburon, where I felt actually that it was a reciprocal, like, yes, my job is to take care of you, and also you feel an affection for me and a desire for me to take care of myself, and even desire to take care for the congregation to take care of me, which I've literally never experienced.
Really?
So I
Wow.
wondered what your experience was with your congregation's expectations, whether it comes from your board. Our new executive director literally said, I consider self-care to be professional development. So sometimes I walk out in the middle of the day to go to the gym, and I'll say, going for some professional development.
Yeah, I will say I feel very blessed that Westminster does care for its pastors well. Whenever I am like at a conference or even on a call with other pastors, I always come away from those events feeling very grateful for my congregation, because sounds like your experience too. Unfortunately, I think many congregations have very unreasonable expectations for their pastors.
Yes.
Westminster, thankfully, has very reasonable expectations. I mean, I just said I'm on sabbatical, right? Like, I mean, they supported me taking 3 months off to renew and refresh, right? They actively supported me in doing that. And I think that it is good for me to do that, not just sabbatical, but like take my vacation days, right? Take my days off during the week, you know, all of that, because not only am I caring for myself, but I'm also modeling how to do that for others in my congregation, right? There are many in my congregation who, you know, work corporate jobs in San Francisco and are, you know, 80 hours a week, like go, 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 go. And so if I can model for them, hey, I'm not answering email on Saturday, right? Because it's my day off and I'm caring for myself. Like I hope it has double benefit.
Yep.
I'm going to care for myself, and I'm going to show them how important it is. And hopefully they will do that too.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What about you?
How about you?
No comment. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I'm kidding. No, St. Hilary is great. The parishioners are always telling me to take care of myself. I think the problem for me is there just aren't enough priests.
Right.
So, like, our parish used to have 2 priests. It's a parish, it's a school, it's very active, very alive. And
just the funerals alone keep you busy. No, I'm serious.
well, we actually have more baptisms and funerals, but lots of things going on, lots of things.
So you used to have 2, but now it's only you.
It's just me.
Oh,
it's just me.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
I mean,
so
you can schedule a baptism, you really can't schedule a funeral.
that's true.
Or you have less flexibility around that.
That is a good point.
That's a good point.
So
But
there's just a lot of work for one person.
A lot of work for one person,
Yeah.
and you know, my parishioners are always telling me to take care of myself, and I do. So we'll get into that. We'll get into how we take care of ourselves. But I love what you said about the why of doing, or the why of taking care of yourself, forming these good spiritual habits. And just from a Catholic perspective, good habits are really what are called virtues, right? So a virtue is an excellent state of the soul. And all the, you know, so good virtues might be like patience, temperance, courage, good judgment, things like that. These are like moral virtues. There's also intellectual virtues, how we feed our minds and become, you know, excellent in our minds and in our souls. So all of those, we talk about virtues, good habits as virtues, and good habits and virtues add up to a good character overall in our theology. And as I always like to say, the only thing you can take with you to heaven is your character. You can't take anything else. So that's the why, I think, of taking care of ourselves. Also, so to be there for others as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I think of virtues, I think of just the word, at least in the connotation to me, is about how I am interfacing with others in terms of making the world a better place, doing good works. And you are actually equating also self-care with a virtue. Or
Yeah,
saying
because
that
the
it's
more
self-care.
good habits that you form, the greater you grow in virtue, the more you will do the good. That's
Right.
what they say, do the good. Good
To
to
put your
others,
mask on first.
good to others, and good to yourself.
Yeah, they are absolutely linked.
Right.
Right. You know, we care for ourselves, and then we can care for others.
Right. And a lot of people point out how, when Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, that doesn't mean love your neighbor greater than yourself, more than yourself. It doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for somebody else, beyond a reasonable point.
Right. And Jewish law is very clear about that as well, that saving a life is the most important commandment. To save a life, the choice to give your own life to save another life is a little more gray. It's like, no, save your life. If it's two lives, and it's not placing a greater value on one or the other. Right. So
because every life is of infinite value. Right?
Absolutely, you save a life, you have saved an entire world. Because
I love that.
That's literally what Jewish tradition teaches, is that if you save one life, you've saved an entire world, because that person could give birth, or and then
descendants down the line.
Down the line, and it literally could lead to an entire world of people.
It's amazing. I love that. I'd forgotten about that statement. So we're going to start off by talking about what not to do. So who would like to start on what not to do? An example of what we...
From our own lives,
yes.
I assume.
Do you want to start?
Well, okay, so...
Bethany never does anything wrong.
I know. I'm like, is there even something you can share?
So Roger writes us notes in advance, which is awesome.
I'm going to read them now.
But so for Bethany, he literally writes in red italics, has she ever done anything wrong? Probably not. I read that to my spouse, who just laughed. So I will say, a lot of the world sees me as sort of unruffleable, right? I do give off this image of
you really do.
Just moving through the world and everything is fine, and often it is. But I've noticed, again, even I'm on week 3 of being off. I think I carry more stress and anxiety around with me than I even realize, or than I even acknowledge to myself. So I would say, for me, what not to do is to sort of even be more in touch with the stress and the anxiety, and be okay with sort of letting it out sometimes, right? To not just always have to be this, even-keeled person, but to realize that, oh gosh, yeah, I really am anxious about X, Y, and Z, and that's okay. And now that I've acknowledged that anxiety, what can I do to, help it out? But it's interesting sort of not having that stress these last couple weeks. It makes you realize, like, before that,
I was pretty stressed.
I was kind of stressed, wasn't I?
So your advice is to let it out. And
acknowledge, be aware. So I guess for me, some of it is just the self-awareness of, what I'm feeling and what I'm dealing with. Mm-hmm. Acknowledge, be aware, and then find good and healthy ways to get it out.
I like to deal with my personal problems by preaching about them on Sundays. No, I'm just kidding.
I think I'm going to need to start going to church.
That's why I said good and healthy ways to get it.
So actually, I have another question, which you can plead the fifth on. Do either of you employ a therapist? Because you are there pastorally for so many people, and you are holding so much stress. Mm-hmm. Do you employ a therapist? And I will just start with, I do. Mm-hmm. And it's hugely helpful. I don't know that there's much clinical going on in our sessions, but she's a wonderful sounding board. And as things come up in my life, she knows me, she knows my history. We've been seeing each other for 17 years. And I find it extremely helpful to have her as both a sounding board and sort of a voice of centered wisdom. And I don't know. And
I do not, but I would if necessary. I have on and off had sessions with a spiritual director,
Mm.
which has been helpful. And in fact, I am already planning, as my sabbatical comes to an end, to go back to the spiritual director, because I think I'm going to need some time to sort of process sabbatical time, getting back into work time.
You want to
So that's-
explain what a spiritual director is?
Yes. So
I just learned about this like 2 weeks ago, literally at a Cantor's conference. I'd never heard that term.
Really?
until
Oh, that's
2 weeks
So
ago.
here's a wild time, right?
It actually is.
Yeah.
next podcast episode, Cantor conference.
What happens at a Cantor's conference
Stays in the
camera.
Yes.
So a spiritual director basically helps me to notice, understand where God is working in my life. How I might be more aware of the presence of God. In fact, some of what we're talking about today, encouraging me to, stick with the spiritual practices that are important to me, that kind of thing. So, you have to go through special training to get a diploma in spiritual direction. Yes. So it's people that really, sort of know what they're doing. Sort of ask a lot of questions about, spirit and God and such, and really just help me to focus in on that part of
So
my
they
life.
focus a little bit more, although psychological and emotional issues will come into that, right?
Sure. Oh, sure.
But
Absolutely.
whereas a therapist is more, I guess, focused on your mental and emotional well-being, the spiritual director is a little more focused on spiritual well-being. But they're both good, and I do not currently employ a therapist, although many of my parishioners would say I should. But I have in the past. Years past, and I did have a great spiritual director for many years, and then he moved. He was a Jesuit priest, and they moved him to Phoenix, Arizona, and I just haven't found anybody else since then. But it's very good just to have somebody that you can trust, that will never repeat what you say, and to help you think through where you are with God and how you're coping with life in general.
I mean, you're there for so many people. I just feel like somebody's got to be your person.
Sure.
Who's there for you. And I feel like when you're in the field of what we do, you kind of, it's helpful to have somebody.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
All right, so I shared what not to do.
Yeah, Naomi,
Oh,
would you like to go next?
sure. So I became a cantor because I'm so sorry, Jim.
Just whack your mic there.
Because I grew up, traditionally, and I loved our home rituals, and I loved the beautiful life around my Jewish life, and I wanted to share that with other people. Became a Jewish professional, and not just a Jewish professional, but a clergy person, and found that my Jewish ritual home life just went out the window. So we have it's a ritual of lighting 2 candles to bring Shabbat in on a Friday evening. And it is a beautiful ritual, and it's combined with other things, and ideally with also sitting together with your family or your loved ones and having a beautiful ritual meal that's also festive, and those candles are just setting this beautiful, basically romantic even, just light, and it's truly I can't even explain how beautiful just the ritual of Shabbat evening dinner is. I haven't done that for myself. The most basic commandment, really, that in modern ritual is to light those 2 candles at sunset on a Friday evening. I could count on the fingers of both hands since I've become a Jewish professional the times that I've done that for myself, and it's actually kind of ironic and tragic. And I keep saying when I'm retired, I'll get to have my home rituals again, and that's not actually the right answer, because I should be modeling Jewish rituals for my
So
congregation.
why has that fallen by the wayside? Is it because you're not working?
Exhaustion.
Or because you're
Complete exhaustion. Friday evening, I come home,
Yeah.
and all I want to do is go to sleep.
Yeah.
Read a book, go to sleep. And that is what I do on Friday nights.
Wow.
Read a book and go to sleep.
So there you have it, folks. True confessions. Moving on.
But so why I ask, oh, sorry, you want to move on?
Go ahead.
Why I ask is because I often feel that way about worship, right? I mean, one of the most beautiful parts of the faith, one of the reasons I became a pastor, because I love to worship.
Mhm.
And now it's work.
Yes.
That's
yes.
true. It's
Right?
very true. It's a
Yes.
sacrifice you make, right?
Yeah. Now I'm thinking about what's next and what I need to do and planning and preparation. So that's why I was wondering, like,
And for me as well, because cantors
'Cause
are known most for
sort of-
leading worship.
right, celebrating Shabbat has now become work for
Right.
you. So yeah.
And the worship piece ebbs and flows.
Mhm.
Sometimes I just wake up and I'm leading a service or designing a service, so to speak, really trying to make it meaningful and add pieces. And for me, that's a creative act, and it's a joy, and it's something I'm so grateful for. And then sometimes it's just the rote, okay, got to get through, got to get to the services and do it.
Yeah.
But I do actually enjoy them. And I have an amazing work partner, and I have an amazing congregation. So
Yes.
I'm not really jaded to that at this
Yes.
point. But yes, it certainly in past times there have been moments.
Yes. And I will say, I have now come to the point where I can enjoy worship and worship even in the midst of being a pastor. But sort of when I was first starting out, it was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. Yeah. Okay.
Thinking about what's happening next, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like when's what am I? Yeah.
Yeah.
What page
What's
am
my
I gonna
next
call
piece? Yeah, exactly. What not to do, Roger?
oh, I thought we were going to get past that.
You can't get out of
Okay,
that.
well, okay. So when I was in the seminary 10 years ago, graduated from the seminary 10 years ago, I was, how do I say it modestly? I was in shape. I worked out.
He was buff.
Fit.
I was in shape. I came to St. Hilary the first time as the associate to the
Priest.
pastor. Before this is my second time at St.
That
Hilary.
new
as
fit
the-
priest.
I was
Sorry.
new fit
She's
straight out
not
of
gonna let go of
seminary.
this.
I know. And within a year, I gained like 50 pounds.
Oof.
50 pounds.
I hear you,
it was-
brother.
It was all the dinners out with all the
Yes,
parishioners. I
absolutely.
wasn't watching myself.
Mhm.
And when I was home, I would eat junk food.
Yes.
Pizza. I would order in. Then I moved to St. Brendan's. It was the same thing. Pizza,
Pizza's
junk
so
food.
good.
And then
Pizza and bagels for the Jews. Pizza and bagels.
Okay, carry on.
and then one of my staff members wrote me this very caring note about
Where's the note? I want to actually see the
I
note.
know.
Oh.
about not taking care of myself, and she's worried about me, and
Oh.
and that was a wake up call.
Wow.
So I started, I don't eat meat now. It's just a health thing,
That's amazing.
and I started eating lots of vegetables. I work out 6 days a week now, and I'm back to that fit.
Wait. You are very fit. Wait, Roger, I need to ask just for myself because I need help here.
Yes,
You work out every day.
6 days a week.
What? 6 days a week? Well, when? What time? Like, how do you make the time for that? How do you carve the time out?
I get up in the morning, and get
What
up in the
if
morning.
you were doing a midnight mass the night before?
I'd still get up in the morning, and do it.
Man, you're an inspiration. Okay, no.
I know.
I actually, when I say that, I'm kind of laughing, but I'm not because I need to. Yeah.
One
Okay.
thing I'm pretty good about is setting boundaries. So, like on Tuesdays, I write my sermons, my homilies, and messages for some, and everybody knows, do not disturb me. I will, unless it's a true emergency, do not disturb me.
Well, okay.
And so pretty good with that. My workout, I'm sorry,
Okay, wait. So
okay.
midnight mass starts at midnight, and what time does it end?
2 in the morning.
2 in the morning. Okay, so now you live on the premises. So let's say by 2:15 you can get yourself in bed.
Yeah.
I need to like really figure
I
out the
can
details
see
here.
this.
Okay, so you're in bed and you are wound up. Do you have trouble falling asleep?
Sleep. I'm not great at sleep, but I'm pretty good at sleep, so I can get to.
Okay, and then what time do you set your alarm for the next day to work out?
Well, on Christmas, maybe I was.
So is there
exhausted.
only midnight
Yeah,
mass
midnight
Christmas
masses
Eve?
I
It's
don't
only
think
midnight
are
mass.
super regular.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But so you would not typically that would be the day that you would probably not work out the next.
No, if it was a workout day, I'd be up working out.
Okay, so what time you said? So what
But
time you said?
fortunately, we got rid of midnight mass a long time ago.
Oh, okay. So what time did you
Well, we
set
may
that alarm
bring it
for?
back this year.
What?
Maybe. Sorry.
Hey, for those night owls. So what time would you set your alarm for? Asleep by 3 a.m.
6:30.
So okay,
6:15.
3.5 hours of sleep.
Yep.
And you feel a little miserable, but you're like, you know
power
that if
through
I
it. You
work
can't
out,
miss.
okay. I'm learning.
It's become a habit.
Oh,
learning.
this is a
Become a
good
habit.
I'm learning.
segue. We
So,
should segue.
We're going to segue to what is a habit. Okay, so a habit
Flip the page.
is a practice that is undertaken regularly and routinely with little or no effort of the mind or the will.
Wow.
Okay, it's an automatic response. Like think about when you first learned to ride a bike, right? Does anybody remember that? Or drive a car?
Vaguely,
Right, you had to, or celebrate a service or a mass, right? You had to think about everything.
Right.
You know, do I turn on the blinker here? Am I pedaling fast
I had a
enough?
child who just learned to drive.
Oh.
There are
And
no words
you
for the
live to
panic
tell
in the
about
car. When a 15-and-a-half-year-old is driving. Anyway, carry on.
But now,
He didn't have any habits.
driving is pretty much second nature. We don't have to think about everything. We should be thinking, right, and be careful. In fact, it can go the opposite way, and we're not careful. But you don't have to focus so much, and that's what a habit is something that has just become so routine in your life that it's normal.
That's why he can get up at 6:30 after midnight mass. It's normal.
That's right.
It's
and
routine.
you can't even think about not doing that habit. So that's what a habit is.
Okay.
And how do we form good habits? So a lot of this I've taken from an author, James Cleary, who wrote Atomic Habits. It's a great book, which I recommend, about how to form good habits. But just quickly, what he says is habits are formed in a 4-step process, right? So there's a cue, there's some kind of trigger, or we call a cue, and it's something that tells our brains that there might be a reward if we do something. Like there could be a reward for exercising. We're going to feel good if we do that.
So true.
And then that cue that tells us that craves that reward, right? So a lot of people go to the gym for the first time going, you know, I know if I work out, I'm going to feel better. And I crave feeling better because I feel pretty cruddy right now, right? So that's a craving. And then with that craving, there's the response because you want to satisfy that craving. And then with the response is a reward. And that reward becomes a feedback loop. So what gets rewarded is what gets repeated. And you just keep doing that feedback loop again and again. And of course, forming a habit in the beginning is hard, right? Because the reward may not be as great as the effort, which is why when we're forging good habits, this author talks about taking baby steps, right? So, but we'll get into that in a minute.
So I think that it's fairly obvious for, say, going to the gym, right? Or, you know, doing something physical for our bodies. But I think that's also true of some of our spiritual stuff, right? So for example, like I want to get into the habit of praying. Anyway, you know, not one might say that. And I think those things could also be true.
Absolutely.
But I do wonder if they're less obvious, right? So like prayer, for an example, the reward isn't necessarily, oh, my prayer's answered, oh, miracle. Sometimes yes. But sometimes the reward is simply you know, I'm growing in my relationship with God, which is not nearly as obvious as, oh, I'm getting bigger biceps, right?
Right, right.
Which is more important. Says the fit priest.
So I think that's true, but maybe a little harder to see some of those steps when we're talking about some
the
of
reward
our
is not as
spiritual
clear.
habits.
100%.
Yeah.
And also, then I'm going to back up, and this might be another subject for an entire other podcast.
Ooh.
The goals of prayer in Christianity. What are the goals? So because I grew up in American Christian society, the word prayer has a certain connotation, and the goals that I think are the goals in Christian prayer maybe are, maybe aren't. I learned much later in life when I became an actual professional prayer leader that the goals of Jewish prayer are not actually the same as the goals of Christian prayer.
Really?
At all. So now I'm curious in terms of the reward, the goals of Christian prayer, or the goals of prayer in a Christian context, and then what is the reward? So I'm curious because the goals in Jewish prayer I think are different than I grew up understanding.
Wait to hear about that. We're actually
Whole
going
other
to cover
podcast.
that. We're
Okay.
going to cover it at the end when we talk about spiritual
And I
systems.
think
mind if we
that
come
could
back
be a
to it?
whole other podcast too.
Yep.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Look at this.
Because I want to know what that reward is. When you pray,
now
what's the reward?
now he's delaying your reward because we're going to talk about it
delayed.
later.
well, that's part of the problem, right? That's part of the problem. The problem with forging good habits is that we have to overcome obstacles, things that keep us from forging these good habits. So like, what are some of the things that may keep you guys from forging good habits. I'll give you the list here and we could talk about it.
Okay.
Fear of failure. Some people never get started because they just don't want to fail. It didn't work in the past, right? So to forge a good habit, you just have to get started and not be afraid of failure. Another obstacle to forging good habits is making big resolutions that are impossible to achieve. So on December 31st, in a state of a hangover, on January 1st, you say, I'm never drinking again, right? I don't know, maybe for some people,
to that.
for some people that could work.
Should I out his cocktail?
But, making big resolutions, yes, this is water.
Yeah, that's interesting.
This is not.
I never make New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
And I thought I was maybe always a little just grouchy to not do that. But now, maybe something in me was like, why do something that's, unattainable, right?
So
So I really like take small, manageable, bite-sized steps.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another obstacle is not giving it enough time, right? So a lot of people, just to come back to the gym analogy, a lot of people will start the gym, right, on January 1st. And then after
January
a month,
2nd, because the gym is closed on January.
and then after, a month, they're not seeing any change, right? And so a lot of people give up. So I heard this great analogy. I've never actually seen this, but like a bamboo tree, right, takes 5 years before you ever see anything come up above the ground. It's forming this deep, intricate root system.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, after 5 years, it shoots up like to a huge plant within like a week. Or no, a month or something like that. It's really great. So we have to give it enough time.
Yeah. I feel like in our conversation today, that already is a theme that has been occurring. Time.
Yeah.
Like, that's hard. So when we think about some of these spiritual habits we want to form, like, it takes time.
Yeah.
So, what does that mean for how we schedule our days and our weeks, right?
Right.
I mean, and then point 2, it also makes me think about what the rewards actually are. So I hate to continue to use this gym analogy because we're focusing only on the physical, and it's so much more than physical, but I'm going to carry with it, like, is the reward getting bigger muscles, or is the reward just sort of that feeling of, I moved my body today and I feel good, right? So like, even like big resolutions, even like big results and rewards maybe aren't what we're looking for, right? It's the incremental
But you
steps.
feel so good when you go to the gym.
Yeah.
I mean, I was telling you guys before we were filming, yesterday I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and I was presented with the choice of rolling over and trying to get another sleep cycle in, or I'm not that sleepy. The gym opens at 6. I'm going to be there. And I'm still, the endorphins and just feeling good about spending like a good hour of self-care. Like, I need to do this more.
Yeah, or to take it away from the gym, like when I sit down and read some scripture that's not related to a sermon I'm preaching or a class I'm teaching, right?
You mean because you love the scripture?
or I always notice something that I hadn't noticed. Always, right? So it's these. It doesn't have to be big rewards. It can be small rewards too.
Absolutely, rewards in and of themselves, and it's good you're talking about reward, because another problem with getting good habits started is focusing on outcomes instead of changing our identity. So according to this author, what we don't want to do is say, my goal, my habit is to work up to running a marathon, just go back to the body, but rather to become an athlete. Or my goal is not just to read a book or 10 pages in a book every night or something, but to become a reader, right? Or my goal is not just to learn an instrument, it's to become a musician. And he says, according to him, he says that the more you work to change your identity, the more long-lasting it becomes, deeply embedded.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then the last one is not getting rid of bad habits. That's an obstacle to forging a good habit, right? Right?
Yeah.
So like, you're not gonna get physically healthy if you don't quit smoking, for instance. Or you're not going to improve your mental outlook if you're always got that negative self-talk going on. Yeah. Or if you have certain vices, that's going to they can spread, right? They can keep you from forging the good habits.
Right.
So let's talk about bad habits. I understand there's a song out there about bad habits.
Ed Sheeran. Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to
Hum a
sing
few
it
bars.
because YouTube will us.
Oh, we have a license. So.
Hopefully just the humming will be okay for the copyright laws. I saw him on Sunday night, by the way, at Bottle Rock.
Oh, you were at Bottle
He's
Rock?
amazing.
Oh, wow.
He did the whole band all by himself with a loop machine. Yeah.
Really?
Anyway,
That's pretty cool.
that's totally
So-
off the topic.
Who
And
has...
so even more off topic, did you see the movie Yesterday?
No.
Oh yeah, you need to see that.
Okay.
So, other than
later.
humming off key, who has bad...
Wait,
Just
what?
kidding!
That was uncalled for.
It was beautiful humming. What bad habits do we have that we're willing to admit? This was not on the script.
Let's see. Bad habits. Well, I kind of feel like we covered some of that when we talked about what not to do. So for
Yeah.
me, sort of holding on to stuff instead of releasing it,
Oh, that's good.
emotional stuff.
Yeah.
I have one that's a good habit, but it needs to be replaced by a better habit, and they're in conflict with each other. So I wake up in the morning, and I do have time to work out. In terms of the clock, I have time to throw on some gym clothes, go to the gym. I don't like to bring the shower, but just go to the gym, come home, shower. I have time for that. But I also really love my quiet morning time over a really delicious, lovingly
Yes.
brewed cup of coffee or tea.
Yep.
And I
Marvelous.
always choose that habit over the gym or over doing some yoga for 45 minutes. And truly, if I just gave up the coffee or tea, or at least that ritual moment with my coffee and tea, which is just so quiet and contemplative, and I could be going to the gym every day. And it's really hard.
Well, that's why, I mean, we started by saying this is about body, mind, and soul, right? So
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you're feeding your soul.
Yeah.
But my body actually is being neglected, and
Yeah.
if I'm being completely honest, it would be more beneficial for my whole
The
body,
whole
soul,
being,
if I
yes.
just
Yes.
got rid of or maybe didn't do it every time,
Yeah.
but maybe got into the habit of getting up, going to the gym, coming back, and I don't need the caffeine. I just enjoy the moment with
Sure.
a delicious cup of something lovingly and rich and a little ritually brewed. So
Very
it's
much
not
so.
like a bad habit as much as it's a choice between a good habit and a better habit,
Sure. Yeah.
significantly better habit.
And that's a personal decision, right, that everybody has to make.
Right,
It's
yeah.
like we have to feed all of the three
Yeah.
components,
It's-
right? Body, mind,
It's a
and spirit.
balance. It really is. It's a balance.
So we'll just skip over my bad habits.
No.
Well, I don't know. I think,
Do you have any?
oh, yes, I do. I think one bad habit is I eat way too late at night,
Oh, yeah.
and it's not good for you, right? And the other bad habit, I have many. One other bad habit is I schedule all my meetings back to back.
Oh, I do
during the
that
day,
too.
And I'm just
Yeah.
totally running.
It's really hard.
No
and you need
breaks.
time
Yeah.
in between, right?
Yeah, no.
And you need to recenter yourself, and so that's something I've been working on, is trying, setting boundaries in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's another balanced one for you. So I would say a bad habit for me is I probably eat way too much sweet stuff, way too much sugar, candy, cookies.
And yet you never
But
gain weight.
You are so.
I hate you.
It's not.
hate
It's
more.
not
I'm
about.
a little
It's not
envious.
about that. It's not about that.
I'm envious.
I know that it is just. It is not about weight or anything, but ingesting that much sugar is not healthy for the body.
Yeah.
However, it brings me so much joy. Like just a
understand.
good piece of chocolate. Kind of when you were talking about your coffee, like I felt the same way
Yes.
about my
It's a spiritual
chocolate bar,
experience.
right?
Yeah.
So again, it's about balance. Like there is no way on this green earth I would give up
No.
my chocolate.
Because pleasure.
Pleasure, exactly.
Pleasure.
And I could probably stand to reduce for the health of my physical body.
Yeah. So and that's what I do.
So,
I like
balance.
sweets too, so I just try to keep everything in proportion.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll have a dessert every night.
Yep.
But it's small portions. So.
I have a good friend who was struggling with his weight for a few years and has really started to get a handle on it. And he was visiting recently, and he's a bit of a Scotch enthusiast, as I am. And I invited him to come up from San Francisco to take an Uber, and I'll pour you an amazing dram of Scotch. And he said, I've got another proposition for you. My company's paying for dinner, and there's this insanely expensive restaurant, like sushi bar,
Uh-huh.
and we can get just tiny bit of the highest quality sushi.
Hmm.
And he said he got into the habit of eating tiny portions of very high quality food that just give so much pleasure.
Mhm,
And we went to this insanely expensive sushi bar in San Francisco. The bill was not too far under $1,000 for the two of us to have like 8 pieces of sushi and some sake. Okay, and he had some Kobe beef, and I think the Kobe beef was what drove the price up, actually.
Wow.
And I have to say, like, quality over quantity, and just the sheer pleasure of having like high quality things to put in your body, and but not having too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into spiritual disciplines. I just want to say a couple of quick things about bad habits. Like, bad habits are something that develops slowly over time, right? It's they're an accumulation of unhealthy decisions. A few bad decisions is not going to be a problem, but when you usually, but when you repeat those small errors day after day, it becomes a bad habit. So like, I've got a great bad habit to share with you. Judging other people. Oh my gosh, never in the confessional, never my parishioners, never. I mean that at the...
Hear that, St. Hilary congregants,
very,
never
He's
that.
not judging you.
But
He's judging us.
When I, pass somebody in the grocery store and they look grumpy, I'm just like, what is wrong with him? And I said hi and he didn't say hi back, and so judging other people, right?
His brother just died. Okay.
But so every small decision we make that choice to like make a judgment about somebody, it adds up and it becomes a habit. And our brains are wired for instant gratification. We crave immediate rewards. It comes from how we evolved, searching for food. It spent all day to just find a meal, for ourselves. And so we're used to getting quick hits. This is a problem with social media. Like I find like the YouTube shorts, and you're just,
scrolling.
You gotta like be very judicious and have boundaries and just turn it off after a while.
Yes.
Bad habits are attractive, they're fun, and so on. So 4 steps to get rid of bad habits very quickly is to change your environment. Like if you have a thing that is causing you to be a bad habit, if you're in an environment, right? So an obvious example is someone who's an alcoholic should not be in a bar. Or if you're addicted to social media, leave your phone behind. Change your environment. Second, change your tribe if you have to. If there's people that are influencing you in the bad direction, and it's a serious thing, you may have to change friends.
That's probably the hardest thing right there.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
And maybe one of the most important, I'm glad you brought that up, right? The people with whom we surround ourselves. So important, either in helping us with our good habits or helping us with our bad habits.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Yeah. Something I say to our congregation a lot is like, think about who your friends are.
Yep.
Who are they, and are they church people? Not that non-church people are bad or you shouldn't have bad, but do you have enough church people, friends, to nurture your faith?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, and I think here in Marin County, that's tough.
Yeah.
We are not a highly religious county at
That's putting
all.
it mildly.
Yes, 100%.
So yes, how many of your friends are people of faith?
Yeah.
Yeah, around here that's hard.
So number 3, make the bad habit something that's difficult to do, right? So if you're addicted to TV and you're binge watching like Netflix every night until 2 a.m. and then you're tired the next day, it's a small little thing that this author suggests is take out the batteries of the remote and put them somewhere. So it like takes extra effort.
Well
You gotta, I'm gonna watch TV, I gotta find those batteries. It's a small thing, but little things like that can add up.
I thought you were gonna say cancel your Netflix account.
If you, that's a big step.
My parents are using it, I can't.
But that's the thing, that would be a huge step, but the battery thing, that's a small step. I like it.
Yeah. If you have a problem with food, he says purchase food in individual serving sizes. And then number 4, make the bad habit something that's uncomfortable to do. So a lot of people will come in confession and confess taking the Lord's name in vain, which is the First Amendment. Not amendment. Commandment. Wait, is it the first or second? I'm the Lord your God. Anyway.
No, it's the second. It depends on how you parse it.
Yeah.
It's actually parsed differently depending on who you are.
Yeah, but
it's one of the 10.
It's one of the things.
It's one of the 10. That's
It's
what we're
either
going
part
with
of the
that.
first commandment or it is the second commandment, depending on how you parse the commandments.
There you go.
And there are different
Right.
parsings.
So a lot of people say, have you ever tried a curse jar? And they're like, what's that? It's like, well, you set up a jar, and every time you take the Lord's name in vain or say a cuss word or something you don't want to say, and you catch yourself, you put a certain dollar amount in there. Not a quarter. These days, you might want to put a $10 bill in.
Yeah.
And when the jar is full, you give it to charity or to Father Roger, one or the other.
And where Father Roger will actually just give it to charity.
To charity.
That's true.
Because he is
So swear jar.
a saint.
In the book, he talks about this guy in Boulder, Colorado, who had trouble getting up on time. And he set an...
He pointed to you.
I get up, I just have a cup of tea instead of going to the gym.
He said...
4:30 no less.
And he said what he did to get over that bad habit was he set an automatic tweet to go out every morning at 6:10 a.m. to like all the people. Apparently, he had a lot of people on Twitter or whatever.
X.
And it said, if you're getting this tweet, it is because I am lazy and have not gotten up this morning. So it's like his own form of public shaming, and apparently it works. So make the bad habit something a little painful to do.
Wow.
All right, let's jump.
Pretty extreme.
That is.
Let's jump into spiritual disciplines.
Okay, let's.
We'll wrap up the show with like spiritual disciplines. We have been talking a lot about the body and so forth, but because it's an easy analogy.
It is, yes.
Spiritual disciplines are things that Christians and Jews have been doing for a very long time to just grow closer to God, right? An early Christian document called the Didache instructed believers to take up spiritual practices like fasting, prayer, giving money, serving, those kind of things, and on and on. So those are some common spiritual disciplines. So what do you guys do for spiritual discipline? And then we can get into your question about prayer and the purpose of prayer. So an obvious spiritual discipline is prayer.
He really is getting back to that.
Thank you.
Good
Promised
job.
So,
What is the purpose of Jewish prayer?
Jewish prayer, and again, I learned this late in my life. Like, I was yesterday old, whatever, when I learned this, basically. The purpose of Jewish prayer isn't about necessarily or exclusively speaking with God, requesting things of God, and sort of engaging in that conversation. It's part of a larger context, but the larger context is more about communal prayer and community, and being together in community. And that's actually really one of the highest priorities about Jewish prayer, is about being together with other Jews praying. And in terms of the texts, yes, there are texts, as we talked about last time, of gratitude and of praise. But when it comes to that section, I think we talked about the three classes of prayer, where you had gratitude and praise, and then you have petition and requests. The petitions and requests, in terms of our formalized prayer, are not individual, but they're communal. It's always praying for the community, the community in the world. There is no formalized Jewish prayer that prays for myself. That is a legitimate form of prayer, but it is not formalized. It is not in our prayer book. It is something that you are welcome to engage in. And even there's a point in one of our most important prayers at the end where it says you may, this is the appropriate time to engage in your personal prayers to God. But it's actually a really small sort of afterthought. So the goal of Jewish prayer is more about community.
So like you pray for the sick within your community, is that right?
And also you gather with community, and there are the most significant prayers that we say can only be said within community. So if you are saying the Kaddish for a loved one who has passed, you actually can't say the Kaddish unless you are in a room with 10 adult Jewish human beings praying with you, which is such a deep wisdom, because if somebody is experiencing that kind of, sorry, Jim, I just
poor sound guy, Jim.
If you've experienced a loss and you believe that you must say the mourner's Kaddish, you can't say it unless you got 10 Jews in the room, 10 Jewish adults. forces you out of isolation.
Yeah, wow.
It forces you into community, into a support network. So it's actually there's a deep and amazing wisdom to that. But that's another podcast. But it's really about community, and it's not about individual prayer. And so now I'm curious to know if I also don't understand what the purpose of Christian prayer is.
Well, I would say that from the Catholic perspective, be interesting to hear from the non-Catholic perspective. Is we say the greatest prayer is the Mass. That's the greatest prayer you could ever say is the Mass, which is the Sunday worship, and because in part because it's in community. And so you're very right about that. Even the songs that are selected, usually speak about we and the community and things sing about community, and all the prayers are about we and so forth.
So what would you say is the goal when you pray? What is the goal? What is your goal?
We're gonna let Bethany answer that.
Look at you just passing that right on.
You haven't said enough. I mean, I do have an answer for that, but do you want me to?
Interestingly, it would very much depend on which Protestant Christian you asked. I think a lot of different people have a lot of different goals when they pray. For me, it's all about relationship with God. Right? If I'm to anthropomorphize, I can't say that word, God, think of God like, as my friend, like I need to reach out to my friend. I need to call them on the phone or send them some text or,
What if God were?
I need to be in connection with my friend or there's no relationship there, right? Same with God, right? So for me, prayer is really about, building that relationship. And because of that, again, this is just for me. The answer will change depending on who you ask. For me, prayer is both about the speaking, but also about the listening. Right? It's not just about what I'm saying to God, but then taking time to listen.
I want to go totally off track. When you listen to God, walk me through that. I mean, I definitely have my own listening. I want to know more. I want to know how you listen to God.
We're so going off the rails.
I'm sorry, we're going off the rails, Roger. And you're next. We're going to ask you.
We need a whole other podcast for this.
Wait. Where's our thing? Prayer.
Make it out. So it looks like a lot of things. For sometimes it's just sitting in intentional silence and just being aware. And it's interesting, I talk a lot about this with our high school confirmation class, because I think high schoolers are just trying to figure out what prayer means. Like, it's likely not going to be a voice coming from a bush that is burning, right? It's likely not going to be that obvious. So, is it just a knowing, like somewhere in my gut or in my soul, is it just a knowing? I often find that God's voice will come to me through other people, right? So being really attentive to what other people are saying to me and how that might be God's nudge through them. A lot for me through creation and just being in beauty and noticing what's around me, especially when I'm outside. That's a really important practice for me, is to be in prayer outside, listening. So there are a few examples.
Thank you.
There are so many ways of praying. In fact, we wrote a book about it. One of my staff members wrote a book about it, based on another book about all the different prayer styles. We learned about that in seminary, but I'll just mention two since you asked. In the Catholic tradition, contemplative prayer and centering prayer are two very common forms of trying to listen to God. So a centering prayer you could think of as like Christian meditation, where you pick a holy word to just repeat over and over. It could be God, it could be holy, it could be Jesus, whatever. And the goal is to simply say that word until your mind is clear. And then it is open to hear something. Contemplative prayer depends on how it's defined and who's talking about it, but St. Francis talked about contemplative prayer as reading a story in Scripture and thinking about placing yourself in that scene. What does it smell like? What does it sound like? What are the sounds going on? What do people look like? And you're there with Jesus or you're there with the disciples or whatever it is, and really making it come alive.
Wow.
So there's all kinds of things.
Oh gosh.
Thank you. Wow,
I mean, we could do 10 podcasts.
Probably could.
So some of the other spiritual disciplines are like simplicity, slowness, smallness, which is like unplugging from an obsession with yourself.
Yes, yes, yes.
Humility, you might call it, surrendering to God, and fellowship, like getting out of, like you were saying, getting out of your isolation.
Yes.
Particularly when it comes to your faith.
Yes.
And like we're always telling people in our church to join small groups. It'll change your life.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
It does.
So in terms of that, let's wrap up the show.
So, but I want to add just
Yeah.
one thing, because we're sitting with a cantor. I think we have to mention the importance of music.
Yeah.
Both music as prayer and just music as a spiritual practice, at least for me, so important. And I'm guessing probably for you.
Yeah, speak
Very
about
much
that.
So important.
Just so important. So, but
Yeah.
ironically, you know, sometimes because the music piece and the singing piece are so much the work, that it's hard to get back to singing for pleasure and singing for my own spiritual
Yes.
renewing.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
that's the tension and the
I
struggle.
mean, that's one way that I tend to pray is I will put on a great, you know, hymn or Christian contemporary piece of music off YouTube or whatever, and put on my headphones and just pray that way. Pray that way.
Yep.
So that's good. What else in terms of spiritual disciplines, maybe from a Jewish perspective, or are we putting you on the spot?
Yes and yes. I mean, I think that the most amazing and important spiritual / ritual disciplines in Judaism really are about like lighting your Shabbat candles. And if you're not a synagogue going person, then I really have to name that I don't think going to synagogue is for everybody. When you express your Judaism, there are so many ways to experience and express being Jewish, and going to synagogue and praying is truly not for everybody. It happens to be something that I love and that I appreciate when people come and love it as well. But I also recognize that it's not for everybody, and I would never want somebody feeling like guilty that they don't come to
Oh,
synagogue.
we want that.
Yeah, I know you want.
Yeah, we call it an obligation.
Yeah,
to attend
no, for
synagogue.
us, it's certainly something that we aspire to, but it's not realistic. Some people, you know, being Jewish there's so many ways to express it and to experience it, and
So let me interrupt.
Yeah.
You just got through saying how important a community is.
yes.
So if one doesn't come to synagogue, where does one find community?
Oh, you know what?
Busted.
let me.
No, I'm not busting.
No,
I'm curious.
Actually, let me further refine what I said. Prayer is not for everyone. Praying, like the actual act. I mean, just to be clear, a Jewish Shabbat morning service is close to 3 hours long. And because we live in an American Christian society where you want to show up on time, be present and attentive for the whole time, coming to a Jewish service on a Saturday morning that's 3 hours long is actually, within that culture, not realistic.
Right. Yeah.
And I could do a whole podcast just on my opinion on Jewish prayer in the different denomination of Judaism and how this is a problem in my denomination. But so coming to synagogue, coming into community, or being involved in the community that your synagogue creates and provides, yes, 100%. Finding what it is, whether it's what we call, you were saying, small groups. We have something called a chavurah that's in my movement of Judaism is a thing. A chavurah, chaver means friend. A chavurah is like a fellowship, and it's a small fellowship. So within the context of a 500 family or a 1,500 family synagogue, there are chavurot, that's the plural of chavurah, and it's small, maybe affinity groups, people who are of the same demographic, whether it's families with children between the ages of 5 and 7, or empty nesters, or Holocaust survivors, you know, or whatever.
Right.
People who have something in common, and just finding an affinity group and then being involved with that, and then you sort of self-start and you meet with them. And the synagogue has other things besides prayer, other events and other activities that are going on. So
ways to be in community if sitting through a 3-hour service is not
yes,
for you.
100%. Yeah.
That's great.
hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there's all kinds of spiritual disciplines out there, and we encourage ourselves and our audience to investigate, to always take your faith to the next level, right?
Absolutely.
Take another baby step in your faith as well, because it'll feed your soul.
It does.
Yes.
Anything else before we wrap up?
I think we have covered so much.
I'm just going to express gratitude
on our
for you
long
too.
and winding road.
No.
Yes. Thank you both. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. We're most grateful to you, our watchers.
Jim and Bill.
Indeed. Woo!
Thank you.
God bless you.